Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 402. I kicked off with d4. My opponent replied d5. And we get into a main line, Queen's Gambit declined with e6, the classical line. Play knight to c3. And my opponent plays knight f6. And now I bring out the bishop. I guess that's not quite the most standard way of playing. I guess the absolute main line is to develop the knight first, but the main idea is pretty much the same. You're going to get the bishop out here and then develop the pawn to e3. So he plays bishop e7, natural move, and then I could once again develop the knight here, but I go e3 first. But after he castles, I play knight f3, and we're now back into a main line. And he plays the unusual move in this position, b6. And normally, if you want to play that setup, you throw in this move h6. So let's show this is called the Tartakower-Makagonov-Bondarevsky, a variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. One of the longest names in the opening book. Okay, so you kick the bishop back first, and then you play b6. And you see it's the most popular move with over 1,000 games in the database still in this position. So quite a solid way to play. And now White has a number of ways to proceed, developing a bishop, rook to c1, or taking. And it's the taking line that is critical in a way. If Black is forced to take back with a pawn, then that pawn will hamper this bishop. I mean, he's set up this the move pawn to b6 here has opened up the b7 square for the bishop with the intent of placing the bishop on this diagonal, but it's no good. It's not doing a whole lot on that diagonal if Black takes back here with the pawn. So the idea is that Black wants to take back with the bishop, and then here the most common move is bishop takes e7, but there is this alternative with knight takes d5, which is kind of interesting and tactical, and it's related to the position in the game. So if you can remember this, this position here, we'll go back to the game now and put on the position from the game. My opponent played b6 first, and I did not take, but I could have taken the pawn right here, and we'll see a difference. So I take the pawn here, and he takes back with the knight. Then here I do have the move knight d5, and it's pretty interesting. So what's going on now? After knight d5, he's sort of forced to take back with the pawn. And so I've accomplished my goal of getting a pawn on this square and blocking his bishop in. And the problem is that bishop takes just doesn't gain very much. I can take on c7 here, threatening his rook, and he has to take back. So that's why c takes d5 and knight takes d5 works in this position. Now, if you can imagine this position right here, my opponent just played b6. And in the main line, the only difference is this position is the same, except that the moves h6 and bishop to h4 have been inserted. But there's a huge difference. And so if we go back to that position, where we've got h6 and bishop h4 in, and he plays b6 now. I take the pawn. He takes back with the knight. If I take with the knight here, he can take the bishop. And the difference is after knight takes c7, he gets bishop takes f2 check. So that's the key point, is that this goes with check. I have to take back, and then he takes back. And, this is a game. It's not like it's losing or anything. It's just that in the other line, it's much more of an advantage for White, whereas here, this is pretty much an even game. Maybe I gain a tempo on the queen with rook c1, but not a whole lot for White to speak of. And so the key difference is that it's the insertion of these moves, h6 and bishop h4. That really makes all the difference between those two lines. So when my opponent played b6 right here, let's just erase the lines and think about this. My opponent just played the move b6, and it's my turn. He hasn't kicked my bishop back which means my bishop is sitting on the g4 square, which means that I can take, and if he takes back with the knight, I can take again, and he can't escape with bishop takes bishop because he no longer has the idea of coming back to f2 with check with his bishop. So kind of a subtle difference, but this move b6 right in this position is actually a mistake that you can take advantage of by taking that pawn right away. And just the general rule here, if you're wondering about how to play this, is if you can take and force your opponent to take back with a pawn when he's got this kind of triangle set up with his bishop, that's usually a good idea. So something to keep in mind. Anyway, I just continue with normal development. It's not like this is bad. I just missed an opportunity to play something better. So he takes, and we get about an even position. So he's got a nice diagonal for his bishop, and you can see already that black's opening strategy has succeeded. And so that's what the player in the TMB system, the Tartakower-Makagonov-Bondarevsky system, that's what he's going for. The open lines for the light squared bishop. He's solved really all his problems. Normally in the queen's gambit declined, the bishop is blocked in by the e-pawn, so he's taken care of that, and he hasn't fallen behind in development, so he's just good here. Knight bd7, and I drop my bishop back to b3. Maybe it's a little more accurate to play, I guess, to the e file. Put something on the e file and try and push the e pawn forward. Queen e2 is the engine recommendation. So this maneuver here with my bishop is a bit slow, and he can strike in the center right away with c5. And but still, I continue with my plans. But I've allowed, by wasting a couple moves here, well, it's not exactly a waste. I've put this on a good square, but at the same time, his moves have been more useful than mine. So somehow he's gained an advantage here. He's got a rook on a file that's about to be opened. He's got pressure on the center, and he's got all his pieces well deployed, whereas I've taken 3 moves with his bishop, which is quite a lot to invest in something that's not immediately paying any dividends. Okay, so he continues with knight to e5. Oh no, it's my turn. I continue with knight to e5. I wonder, was there a problem with the immediate queen to d3 here? No, queen to d3 could have been played. Queen e2 maybe is a little better. So knight e5, not the most accurate move. I get into a bit of trouble here, and I'm just trying to track down. So this is probably the start of it, that knight e5. Before that, well, I mentioned the opening. I didn't take advantage of the opening, so black is equalized. But now he starts to get an advantage here. So I take, he takes back with the queen, and now I get in my queen d3 move. I'm starting to feel okay about this position because now I do have ideas of pushing these pawns forward and threatening on h7. So he defends with the move f5. Interesting way to kind of block things up. It does leave him with some pawn weakness here I could worry about. And now I should play knight takes d7, so I'm not left with a weak pawn here. Instead, I played the move a3. That keeps his knight out of this square. I was a little bit worried about him coming in and attacking these pieces. But he can grab my knight and leave me with this kind of messed up pawn structure. And so was there something better? No, d takes e5 was right. Did he have something better? Knight takes c3 was better. And then c takes d4. Yeah, this would sort of mess things up even more. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, and c takes d4, and queen. Is there a problem with pawn takes d4? I would want to play the pawn takes. He's got knight takes e5, check. No, knight takes e5, d takes e5. What's going on here? Probably the rook over. Bishop e4. Okay, well that was kind of a long sequence. I was going to say I didn't understand what was going on there. Yeah, bishop to e4 is the threat at the end of all of that. So well, that's kind of interesting. So after a3, let's see if we can see the threats in the position. He can exchange here. He can exchange here, although that's what he did, and that's not the main threat. The idea is to exchange here, trade some pawns to open up the c file, and then drop the bishop into the e4 square and skewer my queen and just win a piece. So pretty interesting play. So to avoid that, after knight takes c3, I take back with the pawn. He takes here. I can't take with the pawn. I have to take with the queen, and this is a very ugly situation for me. And now he can take on e5 and leave me with some weak pawns here. So that would be the strongest way for black to play. That's a little bit much to see in a blitz game, although it's the kind of thing you can find in a slow game if you pause to think about it. Look at all your captures and threats. You can discover these ideas. Okay, he played knight takes e5, also a good move, and it does kind of mess up my pawns here. I take back. Queen g5, he gets an active post for his queen, so black is doing really well in this game. I take here trying to relieve some of the pressure. He takes back with the bishop. And I go f3 trying to shut down this diagonal. But yeah, now I've got this backwards pawn I have to worry about. Rook c to d8, making a veiled threat against my queen. I cancel that. I drop back to the e2 square to defend things and get off the line and of the rook. And he pushes on with h5, going for the kingside attack. And it looks like I'm still in the game here. Okay, he has some pressure, but I guess I'm still holding on. I go bishop to d3. He goes h4. Somehow I go b4, trying to create some weaknesses over on the queen side that I can attack. And he defends with rook c8. He could have just pushed on with c4, which might be interesting. Okay, c1, h3, trying to create more weaknesses on the king side. So I have to push this pawn forward. I don't want him to open up lines there. And let's see, were there alternatives actually? No, g3 is the top choice. Maybe bishop takes c5 could have been thrown in. Really? B takes c5. The pawn takes over here. Okay. Or bishop a6 hitting his rook. Okay, but g3 was the top choice. But it does leave these targets. So I tried to trade off his bishop, relieving the pressure, and so I've got back in the range of equal again. So I guess I'm sort of holding on here. Maybe that's not the most accurate move. I should go ahead right here and trade off the bishop. And that maybe leaves me with a bit of an edge. After bishop takes, e takes, queen a6, or b takes c5 is probably what I do, trying to create some pawns that I could go over. Pawns that I could play against. And now rook c to d1. Going after the d pawn. Interesting. So that would leave me with some pressure, I guess, against the center pawns. He still has what looks like a brewing attack on the king side, but it hasn't broken through, and I guess everything seems pretty solid. So that was my chance here to trade off his bishop. I played g4 instead, trying to chase his queen away. And after a couple of trades, he takes, I take. Queen drops back to g6. I thought this would be okay, but he takes off my rook. No, I traded rooks. Yeah, it's given as, there are starting to be threats here on the open f file. I need to make sure that doesn't get too bad. And then b takes c5. Here is the time to take the pawn. I took the bishop here. He takes. And then I take the pawn. And this almost worked. This would have worked, except that my intended move here of rook takes c5 doesn't work anymore. In fact, it loses. It's a mate in 3 if I take the pawn. I checked this afterwards, yeah. And I spotted this before playing it. So queen b1 check. The open f file is really deadly here. So the queen can't interpose anywhere, and the king can't go anywhere. So I'm just getting mated here. I mean, if I interpose the queen or the rook, all that happens is it gets taken, and the pawn is guarding my escape square. So I did spot that one, but not too soon. But not soon enough. I really needed to spot it here. That was I had a back rank problem, and I needed to deal with that. So instead of taking the bishop, it says I could take the pawn here. B takes c5, and leave the bishop in place, and play on with this from this position. Queen e4 looks pretty dangerous. Yeah, that's why I wanted to get rid of that bishop. Now taking the bishop. He takes back with the pawn. But I get this pawn over here. So yeah, this would be much better for me. Maybe I'm even surviving this attack. Okay, so the way I played it was just not the correct move order. I took the bishop first. He takes back. I take the pawn, he takes back, and now I realize I can't take this pawn, so I try rook f1. Apparently e4 would have been better. This is just losing. He takes, I take back, and queen to b1 check. And king has to run to f2, and then the queen. I thought I might do okay, but this is a pretty clever move here. Queen here, taking away all these squares from my king and threatening a check here. He has a winning endgame, I think, with these pawns too, so I can't afford to trade queens. I ran here, and now he just lost on time. He'd been thinking a lot and just ran out of time. But he has a winning endgame after queen g2 check. This is really how the game should have ended, the simplest way to finish it. He goes here. This is completely forced. I have to take it. And then I have to take the pawn because otherwise it's queening. And this is just a winning endgame. And, well, it would have taken him some time to calculate that it's a winning endgame. I do have some threats, but his king is in a position to stop my pawns, and I can't stop his pawns. So it's his turn to move. He pushes on right away with c4. I just play on a few moves so you see how the pawn endgame might go. I bring my king over to stop it. He brings his king into position to support his pawns, stop my pawns. Let's see. How about if I go this way? Then king e6. Yeah, I can't hold on to my pawns. I can't defend my pawns and stop these pawns. So I go over here. He can just grab here. And he's got 2 pawns to 1 against 1 in the center. And I can never really advance this pawn because he always just takes. And he queens before I do, so it doesn't really help. His 1 pawn here is holding back my 2 pawns. So after this, he's got these extra pawns that are just going to break through and win the game for him. So that's how it should have ended, but instead, let's back up to the actual end of the game right here after king g3. Yeah, he just ran out of time in this position when he was winning. So interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.